What's up, folks, and welcome to Retro Ramble. So, I've got another obscure retro re-release for you today. And I have to admit that before this is a game I didn't know anything about. I suspect that's the case for a lot of people. And this is an interesting relic that I think some people will like, but, well, you gotta have some pain tolerance for this one. So, this is Gimmick Special Edition, and I swear there's enough logos on this game to comprise about half the industry, but this PC version that I'm looking at here comes to us from Bitwave Games, who a little while ago put out the excellent Toaplan Shmup collection that I covered here. And this is their new release. And this is actually late NES game that originally only came out in Japan from SUNSOFT. If you didn't play a lot of NES and to a lesser degree Super Nintendo games back in the day, you might not know about SUNSOFT. They were reasonably prolific. They put out a fair amount of stuff back then, and a lot of it was very odd and very hard. Think Blaster Master and games like that. That's one of their well-known classics. SUNSOFT hasn't been involved in the Western market for a long time, but they still exist to this day, producing stuff in their native Japan. And through what looks like I said about half the industry, we've got this today, and it's got the Bitwave treatment on it, and it is a platformer that is very different, very unique, honestly, and has some really cool ideas to it, but boy, it's brutal. So, there aren't a lot of special features in this, but we'll go over them as usual. Check the description for skips if you want to jump ahead and just look at the gameplay. So the only game in this collection is Gimmick. This is not a package of multiple different releases or anything. So from the main menu here, you've got very basic stuff. You can set a custom res, which is nice. But when you jump into the game, that's when you have some additional stuff that you can bring up here. So there are multiple wallpapers, which are nice. Actually, a decent number of them, more than we see in a lot of these re-releases, and they're pretty good for the most part. So you can choose that if you like. And though, oddly enough, there is no none option, I don't think, which I just realized. That's kind of interesting. Screen size, original and zoom, or savage only. You can't customize it at all, which is a little bit of a shame. There's a couple of different controller profiles, and there's some UI candy, as well as a rewind feature, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You have quick save and quick load options, and there's what's called mode select. So the normal mode, which is what the game will always default to when you start it up, allows you to use rewind, quick save, and quick load. Unless you are really, really good at this game, you're going to need those a lot. But here's where it really challenges you. You can't earn any achievements in normal mode. Any of them. You want to earn achievements? You got to go to serious mode. Serious mode, you get no quick save, quick load, or rewind. It's just like playing it on the original NES. So you want achievements? Strap in, fellas, because boy, I'll show you. And then there's a speedrun mode. This is interesting as well. This is the only component that has online leaderboards, but it's a speedrun mode. You have to finish the game as fast as possible. There's 2 endings, and when you get one of them, you'll get ranked on the leaderboard. When you finish it. Yeah. It's brutal. And there is a manual in this, which is nice as well. Now, There was 2 releases of this, so this never came out in North America, but it did come out in parts of Europe as well as Japan. And they have pretty nice quality scans here of the Japanese and European manuals, which I really like. There's no English translation of this, which seems a little strange to me. And without the English translation, it's hard to know what all the controls are in this game. There's a rather key gameplay element that I'm going to show you that you can't really figure out intuitively, and this is something they should patch in, because it's either too well hidden or it's something the game literally wouldn't tell you, which is not amazing. So yeah, here's the online leaderboard rankings. The game came out today as I'm recording this, so there's not a lot on here yet, but there's already like some banana cakes runners in this thing. Which is cool. So normal ending and true ending, right? It's the only thing that kind of sucks is no replays. In a game that's this hard And a game that is focused on speedrunning to the degree they've integrated it here, they really should have had replays. Because someone who can beat this game in 6 minutes is on another plane of existence from the rest of us. I'll just say that, and you'll see that. So replays really would have been in this mode in particular, would have been a really good option. And here's the achievements list. If you launch the game in normal mode, which I'll show you here, you get a little tracker that shows up that you can turn off for these if you want. And there's also some extras, including the packaging design. Again, very nice scans, very nice photographs. Actually, really cool box art for this thing, I think. That's the Famicom cartridge for Japan, and that's the NES cartridge that was released in Europe. Bitwave is part of Embracer Group, and I wonder if this came from the Embracer Games archive. That would actually be kind of cool. So, and there's the cartridge. So we were just jumping through all that, and there's the manuals that we also saw before. So those are your different options. I'm playing with a controller. You cannot rebind your controller buttons, but you do have the ability to rebind keys if you want to play that way. You can even rebind the keys that you use when you're looking in the manuals and stuff like that. Can't rebind the controller buttons, but I mean, this is an NES game. It only has 2 buttons anyway, so, you know, not the end of the world. Okay, let's fire this puppy up here. So, a lot of these Sunsoft games, authentic entertainment. It's authentic something, I'll tell you what. So a lot of these Sunsoft games kind of had oddball sort of stories to them and things like that. You know, Blaster Master, you were a guy who was going after your pet frog that jumped down a hole, but you also were a guy who invented experimental tanks. And, you know, and what this game is about is you're given this stuffed toy for Christmas that turns out to be sentient, but then also the rest of your stuffed toys are sentient, but they turn evil and kidnap your owner into another dimension, and then you go to try to save her. Yeah, like I said, a little kooky. But, you know, it was a nice little intro here. So you see they got her there, and then they all teleport away, and you're like, oh no! And you got to go deal with that. So, yeah. So there is a continue option here. This alone does not save. So what the continue option allows you to do, very simply, you know, if you pass a level and you run out of lives, you can start that level over again. So that's what it is. Start from the level that you were on. And if you're playing in normal mode, the game does have a quick save and quick load feature, which will allow me to show you a little bit more of the later parts of the game. So right off the bat, you're going to see this is not your typical platformer. So you're this cute little green dude who's got this just adorable walk. I love it. And you can jump. And if you hold down the other button, you charge up this star. Now, this is what's interesting. This star is not only your primary attack, but if you time it right, which I rarely ever can, I only do it by accident, you can actually ride it too. And there are certain hidden areas in levels, like up here, that you can get to if you can time and ride the star properly. I have never managed to pull this off, but there's no time limits in the level unless you're doing the speedrun mode. So you can sit here for as long as you want to try to figure this out, but there'll be extra things up there. I would wager, I don't know what gets you the true ending in this game, but I would wager that you probably need to get all the secrets or something to do that. So as you can see, this thing is your primary means of attack, but this star bounces. It takes a little bit to charge up, and B, it likes to bounce around. So you have to get very, very good at aiming it. This game is in the category of what a lot of people in this day and age call a torture platformer. It's not like a Kaizo level torture platformer, not to that degree. It's not designed to just be, nothing but raw pain. But this is a game that is going to test your mettle. It demands a lot out of you. It demands a lot of precision. There are checkpoints in the levels, but they're not super well spread out. If you run out of lives, you have to start the current level that you're in over again, assuming you choose to continue. And there are a lot of hidden surprises in the various different rooms, and a lot of them are environmental. As you can see here, the enemies all have very interesting attacks. Some of them will actually sort of seek towards you and things like that. And a lot of the time, you won't see what's coming until you experience it. And that's very much something that you could run into with like a Kaizo game. Like, for example, here, these little enemies that have the little sort of electric antennas on their heads, you can't hurt those. You have to avoid them. You won't know that until you try to kill them repeatedly and are unable to. The bosses in this game are also, they're all different, and every level has a different boss with a very different degree of challenge and attack pattern to it. But a lot of them are very, I'm going to say a lot of them are very cheap, and you're going to have to die a lot to learn how to attack them. Now, there's a certain genre of game that has the word Souls in it that has become very popular lately and demands that kind of thing from people. So, if you're a Souls player who likes that kind of challenge, so here's the first boss, and you're going to see what I'm talking about here. Yeah, you got to push him off the other end. So that's the interesting thing with this. So there are, if you're someone who likes that level of challenge and having to really work hard to learn, you know, the ins and outs of a game, then you might like this, because you're going to die a lot. You're going to have to do levels over and over again to learn their patterns. Now, the flip side of that, of course, is that the levels are much smaller than in a Souls-type experience. Yeah, gotcha. So you're gonna, you know, it's not gonna maybe require the amount of time investment a Souls game or something like an Elden Ring would, but nonetheless, you're gonna work for your accomplishments in this game. If I rented this for my NES back in the day, I probably would have played it for like an hour and then went, nah, this is too much for me. You know, back in the day, I've talked about this before. Back in the day, the game developers didn't have the hardware resources to be able to make big games for the most part. Cartridges were expensive, memory was very expensive, and if you wanted to make a big game, you had to be a Nintendo or someone who was willing to take a really big risk on your title. So, what a lot of games were like is that they were very hard because they were actually pretty short, but the difficulty is what made them feel longer and made them feel like you were getting value for your, you know, time versus money, right? And that's very much the case with most of these SUNSOFT titles. They didn't make anything that was super long in terms of amount of content. They made things that were really, really hard, and that's how they did it. And that's going to appeal to a certain type of person. You know, I'm an old school retro gamer. I played a lot of rock hard games back in the day, and indeed I beat some of them. But a lot of those types of players are not necessarily into that anymore. Or if they are, they're into something more like a Dark Souls or an Elden Ring that is a much bigger world and gives you a lot more variety than that. But if you are one of those players, you probably never played this back in the day, at least if you were in North America. And it wasn't very popular even in the territories it was in. Like, I think it did okay in Japan, but it wasn't very big in Europe. So there's a good chance you didn't play this. And if you're into this kind of hardcore experience that really requires a lot of persistence and patience, but has a lot of reward at the end, then this may be your jam. And for that reason, I'm really glad this exists, because it's getting exposure of a game to a lot of people who wouldn't have seen it otherwise. Now, that said, this is a very niche title. I'm a little bit surprised that Bitwave chose to do this one, only because, like, the shmups are a niche in their own way too, right? But the Toaplan shmup games had a bigger community, I think, than this might have. Definitely a bigger niche that they were appealing to there. So, little interesting they did this, but I'm glad they did, because this is something that's different and weird, and I like to see not just the popular stuff getting preserved like this. I've said that before. So I'm going to show you the quick load here. I have various quick saves that I've created at different points in the game. I'm also going to show you here the rewind feature. I will say the save and load times for the saves are a little long, considering most emulators can do it, you know, effectively instantly. That's a bit strange, especially since if you're trying to do this for the first time, you will be quick saving and loading a lot if you value your sanity in any way, shape, or form. But nonetheless, it works well there. And in addition, you've got a rewind. And I love the effort they put into this rewind effect. I think it's so cool. It looks like an old school VCR. It does the sort of sound effects of an old school VCR. You know, I love that. I think that's just great. And it works really, really well. You know, it's responsive and it kicks in immediately. You can rewind back, not infinitely, but a pretty good clip if you want. Actually, it may be infinite or much longer than I thought, because this rewound to the beginning of my save state. So, you know, if you're someone who wants to experience this game, or, you know, and doesn't care about beating it in the way it was originally intended or speedrunning it or any of that jazz, or you want to practice because you do want to get better at it, but you don't want to spend the bazillion hours that you would need to do this in the original NES fashion, then these quality of life items are great. The quick saves and quick loads, you know, they work well. They're responsive. They're not as, you know, the saves and loads not as quick as I'd like, but they do work. So you can see how long it takes there, but they do work, and it gives you that opportunity to really practice on stuff. Yeah, also this sort of Loch Ness Monster thing, yeah, it initially tries to attack you, but then you ride on it. And you can also hit it, but as far as I know, you can't kill it. I don't know. Again, this is all crap you have to learn on your own if you want to figure this stuff out. Also, you see that enemy there had a crown on his head? Yeah, some enemies are armored, and you have to hit them a very particular way in order to deal with them. You got to learn all this on the fly as you go. So, you know, interesting thing. Now, the one problem I have that I think Bitwave really needs to patch is that because the manuals are not in English, you can't learn... The game does not teach you one of the very critical gameplay elements of it. You may see in the bottom right there beside the score and life meter that there are items in this game. And they work kind of like Super Mario Bros. 3 items in that you have an item, you pick it up, you store it, and you can use it later. Some of them give you single power-ups for your shots when you're doing things like fighting a boss like this. Some of them are healing items, things like that. So the way it works is when you pick them up, you can store up to 3. If you press the down arrow on the D-pad, you can cycle through them. And then if you press up if you hold up and then press the fire button, you use the item. That is not explained anywhere that I can find. It's not, I mean, it is in the manual if you can read it, but it's not in the menus, it's not in the control bindings, it's not anywhere. And that's rather important. Like, if you can't use items, or if you don't use items, as far as I know, it probably is possible to beat the game without them, but that's like hardcore plus mode. Like, that's for insane people. And I mean, speedrunners would likely be using the items because it speeds up enemy encounters. So you wouldn't want to not be able to use them. So I swear to God, the way I had to figure this out was by looking up an old game guide for the actual NES version that explained all the controls. So yeah, you guys really need to patch something in to explain that, because I could see that leading to some Steam refunds by people going, what the hell, I've got these items, I can't use them, I don't know how this works, I can't do this, you know, this sucks. So I would really recommend they do that. I'm going to be, when I email the video link to the PR rep, I am going to tell them, like, this would be a very good idea. To Bitwave's credit, they are very receptive to feedback. They have actually made a number of updates to those toll plans shmups since launch, including several since my video, where they have taken community feedback into account, including something that I suggested. I mean, other people probably did too, but I suggested it, and they have implemented it. And I really love how responsive they are in that respect. So I have a feeling we'll probably see that happen here. And yeah, I mean, this game is a really cool curiosity. It's for the hardest of the hardcore, or people who are willing to save scum and rewind a lot. There's no way around that. And I mean, if you care about achievements, you have to play this the way it was originally intended. That's a bold choice, I will say that, because that's locking achievements behind the brutalist mode. That's certainly a choice. But I kind of respect it, honestly, because they've said, listen, this game is for hardcore players. So y'all want the prestige of those achievements, you're gonna friggin' do it the way Sunsoft wanted. And yeah, I respect that. I really do. Get out of here, you little buggers. Yeah, you can also stand on some enemies, but not others. And once again, that's a thing you gotta learn. So I respect that, but honestly, it feels like this re-release, I mean, this is only one game for starters. It's not a series. And it feels like this doesn't have as many modernization features and tweaks and quality of life options as even other Bitwave releases. Like, this doesn't have a scanline option in it. I've said before, I don't care about scanlines, but a lot of people do. The Total Plan games have, in fact, very flexible scanline options. More flexible than many. This has none at all. And that's a surprise. I'm sorry. I said before you couldn't turn the background on and off. The option was right there. It's been a long day. Sorry. But yeah, there's no scan lines. That's going to bother some people. When you can do scan lines trivially easy in open source free NES emulators, that's a thing. So I ain't no game developer or nothing, but I don't understand why you could have had all those other options in another emulation collection that you did and then not have them in this. It just seems strange to me. And it feels like, Bitwave got themselves off to a really good start with the Total Plan collection, and it feels like this is a bit of a step backwards in terms of features. And I don't really understand the reasoning for that. But I mean, this runs fine. NES emulation is a long-solved problem, so... Oh yeah, you can push these guys out the way, too. I forgot about that. NES emulation is a long-solved problem, so if this didn't run basically perfectly, I'd be like, bruh. But, no, it does run great. It runs originally. There's no quality of life enhancements like some emulators offer where they can take out the flicker if you turn it on, where there's options to remove the flicker or remove slow. To be honest, there really isn't much slowdown in this game, but some collections allow you to suppress slowdown or NES flicker, things like that. This doesn't. Little things like that would just be nice, given what other collections have managed to pull off. But if you are interested in a rare NES gem, like this came out very late in the NES's life. This came out in '92. The Super Nintendo was already a thing when this came out. And Sunsoft, there was actually some info out there where Sunsoft talked about how they actually had to employ some interesting programming tricks because this game, graphically and in some other ways, actually pushed the NES pretty hard, and it required some interesting trickery to make it do everything that it does, which is always a neat thing. Sunsoft actually had some pretty talented devs in their midst, so it's a cool gem for that. But it's a Sunsoft game, which means it's rock friggin' hard, and it's going to demand a lot of you, but if you're willing to put in the time and effort, you will get some potentially great satisfaction from it. And it plays different. I love platformers, but a lot of platformers are kind of small variations on a theme. This one is definitely not, in terms of the level design, in terms of the traps, the enemy design, the way your attacks work, the way the items work. It's all different. And that's why I'm glad this collection exists, because though it's not going to be for everyone, I said this earlier, but I don't just like to see the popular retro games getting preserved. It's great that they do, but there's a lot of great stuff out there, just like in the indie space. There's a lot of great stuff out there that wasn't super popular, but not popular doesn't mean not good. And it's important to preserve the less well-known stuff as well. And that's definitely what Bitwave has attempted with this release and what they've done in general. So I'm very pleased to see that. So yeah, that is Gimmick Special Edition. It is out now. I can't remember all the platforms, but if it's on other things than PC, you'll see them in the title down below. I mean, I can't imagine that's not the case with how many devs and publishers were involved in this game. I don't know how anyone's going to make money with all the people taking a cut of this title, but I guess they figured out a way. But yeah, it's out now. It's a really neat, you know, gem from the NES era that you probably haven't heard of. I do wish it had more features. I think it should, but it's a cool game that runs well, and we'll reward those who put in the time. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Those do really help the channel out a great deal. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, you know, what do you think of this? Is this something you want to give a try to? What are some other NES era platformers that you really liked? In particular, maybe obscure ones, because that was a big genre on the NES, and there's a lot of entries in it that we probably haven't heard of before. I'd love to know about those. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover other retro stuff over there sometimes, as well as indie games, especially ones that are better suited to streaming than YouTube. We have a fantastic little community there, and I'd love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.